And
Thank you, Vikram.
I know, like I just told you, that it's going to be really interesting, because whatever your posts and all that I've read, I know this is something that I connected with them. So what you will bring, people will connect to. So thank you, Greg, for being part of this.
My pleasure, Vikram.
And of course, Greg, you'll have to tell us about yourself. Time, like I said, is not a factor. No session after yours. So please take time. Tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into the topic. But before we get into the topic, I'll take a minute to talk about where to find information about me. But please.
Yeah. So my background, well, I've been a mediator for now 31 years, and I've been teaching mediation for about 25 years. So I'm a lawyer, although I sold my legal practice a quarter of a century ago just to do ADR mediation. So I've had a broad experience. Initially, I did a lot of family law, but now, since in the last 2 decades, more commercial government work. I've been doing some arbitrations, which was a mediation arbitration model. I'd mediate first and then I'd arbitrate. And I've been doing some policy work and so on. So it's sort of a broad variety of work, but mainly I would say I work predominantly in the what's called the facilitative model. I always believe that I'll try and get the parties together, even if it doesn't happen because of various reasons. So my attitude is that I'm working to get that human connection. So that's why I call myself a humanistic mediator. So yes, so I'm still mediating part-time. I'm sort of a semi-retirement. I'm enjoying the later years of life and traveling, but I still mediate and I'm enjoying it still.
But now, Greg, what you have to do is you have to help me set up the Australia Mediation Circle. And I'll take you, just give me 1 minute. I won't take lots of your time, but I need to put it up only because, look, the thing is that each session is, of course, different and everyone is not going to watch all of them. So I need to put up a little introduction before each of them. So just mediatorvikram.com, you can go there and find the information. So Greg, this is what we have for this symposium. It's a small panel. I mean, I normally have larger events, but I think philosophy has scared people off. So that's what I think. So we have people from, of course, Kyrgyzstan. Milan was, that session was really interesting. He's from Slovakia, in the US, Ireland, Greece, Vietnam, Barbados, and Mexico. Of course, Greg is here in India. So I mean, we had these are sessions like Gabriela and Elizabeth. They're going to do their session in English and also in Spanish. So we'll have 2 sessions there. So I felt that let's at least, I know because a lot of people in Latin America only speak English, Spanish. So I said, let's do something Spanish. Brenda also is going to do her session in Spanish. She is setting up, she created this whole about medical mediation or healthcare mediation, as she would call it. So she had a session in the conference on that. So this is how people connect. And this is why I put this out, Greg, is that I physically also exist. I'm not only a person on the screen.
Yes, that's good.
So of course, the support part of it, I put it out there because look, I do not want to charge for things at this point of time. I mean, look, people don't support and I don't take it forward, and this dispute resolution revolution has to go forward, and we'll see at a later stage. But right now, I want people to benefit in every corner of the world for like Greg's wisdom and his experience. Why should I limit it to a few people in a room? Let's open it out. Let people benefit in every part of the world. So this will give us a certain idea of shows and events of the various events. There are more than 450 videos. So, I mean, for people to watch them, so they get some idea as to what they want to watch. This is what I want to really, the World Mediation Circle being a global web of mediation circles. So every school, community, organization, we put them out. Then issue-based, like I put it out that the climate change mediation circle, then we'll have various other, whatever be the issue, let's create that. So we'll get these, identify people within that community, within that school, within that, whatever issue-based it is, who have that mindset, the mediator mindset. And they'll bring together a totally different approach to just having conversations. I think that's the most important thing. I think people are missing out on fair, reasonable people being part of conversations. So I mean, these little conversations start and then they go forward. But this is where I'm telling you what, when you read that about the humanistic approach, and this is what I put out there. So it connected with me, that Greg is talking about the way taking mediation in the direction that I wanted to go. Because definitely there is the other side of mediation, which whatever call it, whatever the settlement concept or whatever. So that is also going to exist, and I'm not fighting any system. I'm just saying, on the other end, there are people who are looking at it from another angle also. So let's bring those people together. So that's about, I mean, of course, people can read about it. So the other thing I said, look, for that, let's take it forward. Let people be a patron. So I put out the click here to the Patreon thing. You can go there. I mean, I said small amounts. I said for participants, I put them into three categories. I said participants, the ones who want to resolve the disputes in that manner. We have the peacemaker to bring in the participants and the mediator together and create that whole circle, as we call it, for that, but for particular issues or in general. And then we have the mediators. So I've put a small amount for each of them. So let's see how it goes. So Greg, your show from here onwards. I am I a mute spectator? Let's see whether I'm mute spectator or not.
Uh,
I
uh,
totally yours, please.
Thank you, Vikram, and thank you, those people listening. I suppose the philosophy. What is the philosophy? And I think you've talked a bit about this, but I suppose I would describe it as, what is it that is sort of the what is it the cocoon that I work in when I'm practicing as a media, and I think also in life. And the way it came about actually was quite interesting. I was just a lawyer in a country town. I had my own practice, and I went and did a mediation course back in 1991. And I was very fortunate to get a lot of work straight away. The courts were wanting mediators, so I went down to Sydney, did 4 court mediations, and I went up to Brisbane and did a commercial mediation up there. And so I just got into it, and my training was the facilitative model, so I just did that. Then about 4 years later, the local university, Southern Cross University, said, Greg, you're a mediator, come and teach it to our undergraduate students. So I did the undergraduate course, and I just went through and showed them what I did. And then the dean said, look, we want to make it online now. You've now got to write the course, and you've got to put in the mediation theory. And I said, oops, what mediation theory? So I went and had a look at the mediation theory, and I found it didn't speak to me. As a mediator, it's a cacophony of action and interaction, and I'm just holding the space. Where a lot of the theories were very static theories, balanced power, neutrality, self-empowerment, just outcomes. They lack context. And I think a lot of it in the beginning of mediation was a defense against the legal profession, saying, look, you guys aren't real. Yeah, you're pretend lawyers or you're pretend counselors. So as mediators, we said, no, we're really good. Look, we have balanced power, we're neutral. And I think that's really hindered us. And that's not my philosophy. I don't pretend to weave any magic wand for these people. I'm there to actually provide a space for them to move forward. So in looking at the theory, what I ended up looking at a lot of psychotherapy theory, economics, a lot of economic theory, because economists work in that, they don't know what's going on at any time. Science, I looked at a lot of science background. In the IT industry, a lot of work in the IT industry coming out, and change management and complexity theory. So you see a lot of my writings are around that. But if you go back to the basics, I remember listening to Catherine's introduction in your series saying Greek, Indian, and Chinese are the basis. And when I've looked at my theories, they go back to those 3 countries that have been around for thousands of years. So I'll start my introduction by starting with Greek, then Indian, and then some Chinese. So in looking at my overall philosophy, I would say it's a philosophy of flow. In my view, that as a mediator, when someone is in conflict or in a dispute, the flow is blocked. And looking at it from a flow perspective, My role is to see if I can help them unblock the flow and open up the new era. So I go back to the Greek I now have to pronounce this correct, Heracles, if I've got that correctly, speaking. And he had 500 BC, and there were two sayings that he said. And one is that no man steps in the same river twice, for he's not the same man, he's not the same river. And to me, that is the essence. Nothing is repeated. Life never repeats itself except by accident. And so when I mediate, this is a fresh thing that will not happen again. So every time I come to mediate, it's new. And the other thing he said was that the only thing that is constant is change. And so in a way, what I see is I, as a mediator, working in the flow of life, particularly at the focal point where there's a blockage. And I think what's happened in our modern world, our modern industrial world, where we structure our days between getting out of bed in the morning and getting to bed at night, we structure it with hours and our diaries, and we're going to go on holidays, we have our festivals, our rituals. We structure our life, and the legal profession since the Industrial Revolution has done that with black leather contracts and forcing us into structured things. Whereas in the 21st century, we live in a much more fluid world with COVID, with climate change, with the modern world of interconnections. And so in a way, I think as a mediator, if you look at it from flow, this is the 21st century world we live in. Whereas I think the legal profession, with seeing conflict as a solution, get a solving, I think I would class that as 19th century structured thing. And it sort of sees flow as something wrong, whereas I see flow as something that allows something to emerge. So out of that comes the concept that mediation is about necessary endings and new beginnings. And we mediators are in that change, and anthropologists call it the liminal stage. It's when the past is, you haven't got out of the past, but you haven't got to the future. And the classic one is a teenager. Teenagers are no longer children, but they're not yet adults. So I think in the concept of flow, we work in that changeover period. So that would be the overall philosophy. And I think when you think about flow, I think then when things go wrong or when things happen, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just life. And so in a way, as a mediator, I just hold the space. And in a way, while I'm in the room, there's hope. And I try not to get depressed when I see really difficult case. In fact, if people see me depressed and think it's not working, they will react. I have to remain open. And I'll often say, look, guys, I've seen worse cases than this. So in a way, I think we hold that flow. So that would be my first thing, Vikram. And just one other point on the Greek issue, the concept of time. For Greek, in Greek, ancient Greece, there were two concepts of time. One was Kronos, which was the god of time. And Kronos, I think, found out that his children, through a premonition, was going to overthrow him and kill him. So he actually killed all his children. And in a way, what he was doing then, it's about using time as the death creeping up on us. So I'm going to try and stop death creeping up. So that sort of time is linked to measurement. And I think this is the industrial revolution world, the world we're stuck in, where we measure time by the minute. Whereas the alternative, the other definition of time is, if I say this correctly, kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S, which is the right time, the time of opportunity, or God's time. So in a way, again, it comes back to this thing of flow, of time. When something goes wrong, this is the time for opportunity and rightness. So that would be the big picture, I'd say, Vikram, of what I see as my guiding philosophy.
Well, I think that's really interesting. But one thing I'm going to maybe put out here, because interestingly, you spoke about things like neutrality. You spoke about that. So I'm just bringing it here that there is a symposium starting on the 12th, from the 12th to the 16th, which is neutrality and mediation. Let's question these aspects, because definitely these are areas which have been taken up, and the whole everyone keeps saying neutral and neutrality. We need to question it. And Bernie Mayer has written a book called The Neutrality Trap. So we're going to question that. So please participate in it. So this is, I mean, of course, what Desmond Tutu said, this is something really important. So if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. So let's take this up. I'm just bringing it here at this point of time, because I just felt that you said that, and I really feel needs to be discussed. All these things have to be discussed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's an important issue, because I think it's one of these things that mediators got caught in very early on. And I think it's a defense to the legal profession, saying, come on, the judge will say, look, I'm neutral. I balance the thing up, and I'm a neutral independent. So we mediators said, no, we're neutral too, So it's a reaction. And I think it's a wrong thing. And I think Bernie Myers pointed that out. And I agree with Bernie. So I will approach it again from philosophy. And I draw a lot on psychotherapy, and particularly an American psychotherapist called Thomas Ogden. And I think what I would say is that I have a personality. I'm sitting here and you have a personality. But when I go into the mediation room, it's not my personality. I have to actually lose myself. I actually have to lose my personality and allow the parties into the room. Because if I dominate, the people are very respectful, and people will go with you. And look, you're the mediator. You must know what you're doing. Okay, I'll answer your questions. You're a retired lawyer. You must know what my personality. It's not about me. But what I think is what I want them. If we're looking at the concept of flow, I want them to flow. I just don't want to give them an answer. I want them to flow. So it is becoming one with them. And what I think happens then is a voice comes out of the three of us, say it's two parties and myself, and it's called, psychotherapists call it intersubjectivity. It's the voice of the room. And it's not me, it's not them, it's the combination of us. And what happens after a time, we can speak through the voice that we couldn't speak for ourselves. And so the three of us become one. Do you know what I mean? And so that's not neutral, but it's not. I don't know what neutrality doesn't apply. And going to the Chinese, the Taoists have a concept of the Tao. It's all the 10,000 things, and it's becoming one with the Tao. I think that the Taoists understand that concept of emptiness, and you see that in various things. Mindfulness is sort of a concept of that. Zen calls it the don't know mind, or the no mind, or wu shi is the word. So this whole concept of actually disappearing my personality to allow the room, to me actually to join the room. And I'll give you an example. I've done a lot of abuse cases for the religious organisations, child sex abuse, where many years later they come and they meet the bishop. I've worked in the military, where victims of abuse within the military come and meet a general to get an apology. And what I have to do is hold the space for them, and I talk to them, and I build a relationship with them. And when I bring them into the room, I ask the general just to sit and listen. And I haven't engaged with the person who's been abused, and oftentimes I have to hold that space. If my mind wanders, they will lose their train of thought. So in a way, what I would say is this concept of the emptiness of the mediator. And if we come back to my concept of the flow, if I've got my personality dominating, it's about me. I'm trying to actually create the space. Now, of course, you have to be very careful. what I would say here is that I would never mediate without a proper intake from both parties. You cannot go into a mediation cold turkey. You have to do that. And in that, I build the relationships, and that allows me, when I bring them into the room, to hold the space. So in the concept of the philosophy, when I first meet each party, what I will often say to them after introducing myself, I'll say, what's your thought about meeting the other person next week? And dead silence. And I just want that conversation to start and get that sense of that person, because I'm going to hold that sense and from the other person, and I will come back to that. So neutrality, I'm there, I'm affecting. There's no way I'm not affecting the room. So I'm not neutral in that respect. But by emptying myself and being, the don't know mind, and I think your previous speaker was talking a bit about that, emptying him out. That's, to me, is one of the essences of, I would say, how I enter a mediation.
I think that's really a key. I mean, like if you were quoting from Socrates, that she was saying that I know nothing. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. So I think that part of it is something which, like I said, to reach that point, are you reaching a point, or that's where you start from? That's another discussion, but that we'll keep for another time. But that's something that is. But a lot of interesting things you said. I mean, I'll take it over maybe later, but these are things which I need to point out, that those are important. When you say this is not the same river, not the same man, I think those are very important parts. The not the same man part of it is also really important.
That's right. But I think also your culture has given so much. And I go back to the Bhagavad Gita is really one of the most pivotal books that actually, when you look at all the major religions, have drawn from it. Christianity, Islam, the whole lot that's there. And I think I've looked at that a lot, because again, I'm trying to explain this concept of what I call mediating the moment, in that I don't mediate the problem, I mediate the moment. And if I mediate the moment, the answer will emerge. So I heard this whole concept of emergence, again from complexity theory. But the Bhagavad Gita really is about the nature of action. And in chapter 13, which talks about the field, and that's again bringing, going beyond this duality of right, wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, to the unity. There is no boundary; it's just a continuous field. And I think when we as mediators work in that, right, wrong, you're right, you're wrong, and we have a lot of the problems in the world is about, this dual way of thinking, and you've just got to look at the conflicts in the world where I'm right, you're wrong, you're bad, and I'm good. We see it in the US at the moment with Democrats and Republicans. It's sort of, so what the Bhagavad Gita would say is we've got to go beyond that field of duality and find the eternal unity. So that's chapter 13. And I think that I've often felt the field is, as a mediator, there is a field within the mediation, and a lot of it is about I have to get out of the duality, and so I'm bringing the two stories into one. So in a way, by asking in the intake, what's your thoughts, what's your feelings, I'm trying to capture during the joint session, I'm trying to capture the voice and that thing of the unity. You're both losing here. You're both upset, and so on. So I'm trying to draw that unity in. And so that's good. Chapter 2, I think, is an important part of the Bhagavad Gita also. It's about, it refers to 3 steps. Arjuna, his battles and so on. What Arjuna, what it's really saying is there's 3 steps. And first of all, you got to learn your craft, like he was a warrior and so on. But you'll learn your craft as a mediator. a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. And it takes practice, and you've got to learn how to do it, and you've got to physically do it. So it's a real thing. The second part is that you've got to find your true self, it says. To be free, to be totally in the moment. And again, this is coming back to being in the moment, I was talking about. And he talks about becoming less of oneself to allow the parties to come in and become one with them. And that's what I was talking about in the with Ogden, about that intersubjectivity. So he really talks about allowing that to come in, and it's your fear and desires are the thing. So as a mediator, I have to get rid of my fears and desires. My fear that I don't know what's going to happen here. My desire to be the fantastic mediator that solves all the problems of the world, I like to get great wins so I can tell everyone, hey, I just solved that case, No, get rid of that. And again, that brings in the Taoist concept of the Tao, the 10,000 things. So again, the ancient Chinese have also picked up on that. And then the third thing he says is you've got to go beyond the illusions of duality. This illusion that we're two things, Democrats and Republicans, they're the same thing. They're just in different order. So you look for unity in the shared experience. So the mediation to me is the shared experience. So why I argue for the mediator to be facilitative, where I bring the parties together, it's the shared experience that gets that unity. As opposed to the legal profession, certainly in Australia, the legal profession has adapted mediation big time. I mean, hardly any matters are going to court anymore, but the judges are even mediating. But it's a very much a Western dehumanized mediation model where you don't get the parties together, you crunch a deal and you say, look, I got you a deal, better than nothing, go off, and go on your way. Whereas I think and that can be okay, sometimes people need to be hit on the head and get going. But what I think you do is you end up with just a compromise between two parties, whereas in the humanistic one, by allowing that unity, you get not only the necessary ending, but you get the new beginning. And I think that's what facilitative mediation, the humanistic mediation, is about, the new beginning. The necessary ending is just part of that. And if I was to give to create a saying or a motto for mediators, this would be my motto, that all mediators should have written on behind their thing. And it comes from a book written about 100 years ago in Italy by an author called Lampedusa. And he was writing a book about the rise of Italian nationalism when the Italians were in lots of states. And the book was called The Leopard. And very early on in the book, this was a comment. He said, if we want things to stay as they are, then things will have to change. And that is really the key. If you in a dispute want to keep your position, then you have to change to do that. And I think that it again brings in that flow concept. So in a way, what I suppose my overall philosophy as a mediator, I go into the room with knowing this will be a fresh mediation that's never been done before. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm not going to rescue them. I'm going to try and find that unity. I'm going to try and hold that space, and time is the mediator's friend. And my colleague, Barbara Wilson, who from England, Margaret, my wife and I run the mediation retreats in Tuscany every year. And Barbara is an English, very good mediator. And her saying is time is the mediator's friend. And I think that's correct. We just play with time and we hold it, and time heals all wounds. And that's another Greek saying, time heals all wounds. So it really goes back to ancient history, Vikram, the whole lot.
I think each of those points that you brought out, but I like this part. Maybe this is what is important: mediating the moment. I like that part. think that's where where the key lies. Again, it's the same thing. It's about you being in that moment. To be in that moment, you have to be one with yourself. I think that part of it is also how, looking at from mediator's perspective also, because one is the process, but and this is where, which I was talking to Vedana, which we of course could not get much time, which you will maybe add more value to, is the aspect of the heart soul spirituality part of it, and the authentic self and all those things. But before that, let me just put out, because you did I mean talk about the Gita, but I'm taking from Rumi, because Rumi said something which you are kind of talking about, is this: somewhere beyond right and wrong, there is a garden. I will meet you there, which of course
Yeah.
I'm sure you heard. So then I think these are things which, look, in relation to the mediation as it's understood, again, it's the elephant in the blind man situation. So definitely some people will experience it in certain ways, and that is what mediation is going to be for them. And that's where I have the biggest problem, because there is this, if you call it westernized or whatever, there is a box of mediation which is going around, and if we let it go around longer, that's the mediation that people will experience, and this humanistic approach that you're talking about will get lost in the entire picture, because people will associate that word with that process. So that's where, Greg, we have to work fast. Let me say, we have to work fast, because otherwise the other aspect of whatever settlements or just deal making or whatever might take over. So you have to be looking at it from that from time might not be a factor here.
Yeah.
Mediators might have time otherwise in the mediation, but here it's a bit of an issue.
But I would say I wouldn't be too down about it, because in a way, certainly in Australia, I think I would say mediation really started again in the late 1980s, early 90s. So it's really 30 years, which is very young for a new profession. And don't forget, we're coming out of a very established 3 centuries, well, in the Western, 3 centuries of legal, dehumanized adversarial mediation. And it really is, that's a culture that people have get into. But the trouble is, it's becoming very expensive. And in the modern world we have, is that you can't afford to go to court, because if you don't disrupt internally, your opponents will disrupt you externally. So really, I think what's happening now with a much more flowing world, they're sort of seeing conflict is actually good. It's an energy for change, and that it's the new beginning. And I think that's why I say the legal profession is stuck in the endings. And, when you settle them out, okay, off you go, see you later. Whereas the mediator is in the new beginning. So I think it's changing. And I think some of the philosophy that's coming out, I think once people experience it, I think that it will keep going. And I think, certainly I've seen in the last decade in Australia, mediation just taken off. It's still fairly much structured, dehumanized, but there is now a lot more humanistic mediation. And now we've got a lot of very good lawyers who can do both. And that'll be the change. And I find once lawyers come along and sit in on these more humanistic mediations, their eyes open. And I've seen some fantastic lawyering, lawyers getting really good results from really terrible situations through allowing the parties to create something new. And I think that's that. And I think it's all, we're struggling with 3 centuries or 2 centuries of ingrained legal black letter structured law. And it's pretty hard to knock it on the head, but I think it's going to happen. I think over time it will.
But that was the idea behind that symposium on colonization, decolonization, and mediation, which I had. That was in September. That's the idea, to discuss this aspect, because definitely over all these years, hundreds of years, the kind of mindset that has developed, to change that is not going to be something which is going to happen immediately. Definitely, it's a conditioning of the mind, and that's something which we need to change. But Greg, I'm going to put up this, because I'm going to put this up in every session, because this definition of mediation, of philosophy that Andrea brought in, I want to, I'm sure you've seen this in whatever, in Fridana's session, if you were listening to it otherwise, but I want to put it up here, because why I found this really interesting is that, are we going to look at it as mediation as philosophy and mediators as philosophers? You have to, of course, give your thoughts on that. So this is the definition, and I'm going to read it out also. Philosophy is quite unlike any other field. It is unique both in its methods and in the nature and breadth of its subject matter. Philosophy pursues questions in every dimension of human life, and its techniques apply to problems in any field of study or endeavor. No brief definition expresses the richness and variety of philosophy. It may be described in many ways. It is a reasoned pursuit of fundamental truths, a quest for understanding, a study of principles of conduct. It seeks to establish standards of evidence, to provide rational methods of resolving conflicts, and to create techniques for evaluating ideas and arguments. Philosophy develops the capacity to see the world from the perspective of other individuals and other cultures. It enhances one's ability to perceive the relationships among the various fields of study, and it deepens one's sense of the meaning and variety of human experience. So, on these thoughts, I want your thoughts on this, because I was just talking to Fidana, that is mediation practical philosophy? Are mediators practical philosophers? So thoughts on this are important, because this is something like a direction this is taking for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I think philosophy is an intangible concept, because it means what it is to each person, and your philosophy of life and so on. And I think we don't think about it. I think we get into the world of measurement of life, and I talked about Chronos time of I've got to 4 o'clock, I've got to go and buy the dinner for tonight. And I think one interesting thing that COVID has done is, certainly in this country, is brought us back to the village. People are now not going into work in the cities; they're setting up at home, and we actually, community is returning, which is, in my way, the end of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution really ended in 2007 with the beginning of Napster, which was the first sharing economy. That has Jeremy Rifkin has written, an American, I think he's American, talked about the world has changed from 2007. But I think COVID has also done it, because it's the human connection again. And in a way, we're now starting to think, well, especially with climate change coming, I know our country is being wrecked by floods. We've just had fire. I live in a fire zone here. I have to have a fire plan ready. It's part of the life that my whole building here, my setup, could go, and I have to start again. So this is the world of flow and so in a way, I think it's forced us to think about what's the meaning of life, what is it about, and it's human connection. We connect through humanity, and although there's lots of wars and there's lots of in the world, what is the strength of the human connection is our human connection. And in a way, if we look at it that kind of thing, there are necessary endings of through these conflicts, but it's the new beginning that's coming out. So I think the philosophy, I think in a way we all try and find our own philosophy, but it really is about the higher order of thinking. The only thing I disagree within that term is the concept of rational, so that we can get a rational answer. I think that's falling back into the trap. Where is it? Providing rational methods for resolving conflict. There's no rational method. Sorry, doesn't exist. That's an illusion, and I think it's something we hold on to think. It's this concept of best practice. This is the best. There's no such thing as best practice. It's past practice. This is no man steps in the same river twice. We like to think we have a rational, structured world, and we get really upset when things go wrong. And this is what the philosophy is no, it doesn't exist. Go back to your thing. I know nothing. If you want to understand the world, there's no answer. Once you understand there's no answer, then you can work in it. That's the key. If you think there is an answer, you're on the path to a demagogue of I've got the right answer. It's my religion, not yours. It's Democrat, not Republican. It's this duality that Arjuna talks about. We've got to come back into the one. So I think, and because look, Vikram, you and I, we're trying to be we're having a rational discussion here, but there's no rationality of life. It's life is actually experiential, and so in the moment, that's why I say the only thing we've got going for us is this minute now we've got together. What happened 5 minutes ago and what will happen in 5 minutes is not out of our control. If we do what we do now with honesty and integrity, you set the scene for what comes up. And the mediator, I've got their part. The best thing about mediation is a venue. I get them in the same room. I get them in close by to each other. I've got them in the presence of the now, and that's the most powerful thing about a mediation. I bring them into the moment, and if I like Arjuna, if I've trained, if I've used the field, magic happens. I've got no idea what's going to happen. It's not me, but what it is, it's allows something to emerge. And there's I get a lot of stuff from the Santa Fe Institute in America. It's an institute set up by Nobel Prize winners in science who realize there's not exactly what we're saying. There's no answers. So how does a scientist work when there's no answers? And so what they do is they get the top scientists from around the world to work together across fields. So you'll have a dentist and a scientist, and make them work in areas that's not their expertise. So they actually have to bring all their skills and they have to do that. And that creates all these dynamics. And one of the things that come out is a concept by a guy called Murray Gell-Mann. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1969. And he talks about emergence. And what happens with emergence, when something emerges, it's got no relationship to what just happened. It's something, it comes from left field out of the blue. And I see that often in the mediation, that we're going along, someone makes some concession and suddenly someone says, what about this? And we've moved into a new area of mediation, and it's got nothing to do with what we were talking about before. It's like the quantum leap. And so in a way, I think by holding that space, you allow that jump to come, and it's that connection of people. And the other person from the Santa Fe Institute, Stuart Kaufman, he came up with the concept of the adjacent possible. And I think that's a fantastic term. And it's that thing that when you're mediating and someone makes a small move into what's possible, it opens the door to a whole new area. And again, it's that concept of flow. And I think as a mediator, I hold the space to allow the space for something possible to come. Whereas I think the legal professions say, okay, I'm an experienced lawyer. I reckon if we can get X, Y, Z over here, so I look to the solution, that's what we want, and now I try and close the gap. So it's the opposite. It's the and whereas as a mediator, from my perspective, I start with where their parties are now, not where I want them to be. And that's a whole different complex, because if I work in the moment, I bring in all this concept that I'm talking about, a flow and a human connection. Whereas if I'm down in the future of I want X and you want Y, we're into positional bargaining. And once you have positions, it distorts, everyone starts playing games, and you've lost, it's a game playing thing, and you're in a different area. And of course, the lawyers love that, and they fight over it, and they get a success. You get a deal, costs you a lot of money. Whereas what I say, using Murray Gell-Mann's emergence and the adjacent possible, I move out in directions, and it might end up way over here instead of what over here. Yeah. So that's a long-winded answer, Vikram. But
this is interesting. Well, the idea is to discuss it, because when you're talking about rational, so what we're really saying is that, of course, if you try to be rational, you are limiting the process and the organic growth or the direction which has to take. Maybe that's it. That's what I'm saying. That's nice to put it out, and let's just have these discussions, because what are we going to ultimately? I mean, it's not that we are going to put out a theory on it, but at least there is a discussion on the larger aspect of what is happening here, because I think that is something that for me, with the process being special and the mediators being special, comes out from the fact that there is lots happening here. So that's why we're discussing it on a different angle. I mean, one is the other theories on, I mean, of course, you have theories on everything, but I think the core of it sometimes gets left out. I don't know. Yeah.
So one other thing I was going to say about the Greek culture, because, and I come back to Jacqueline Morneau. Myself and my wife have worked with her a couple of years before COVID. We attended her workshops, and she's in her 80s, fantastic. She developed mediation in France, Italy, the Latin countries, South America. And she brings a lot of the Greek, for her background in Greek. And I've called it humanistic mediation in honor of her. That's her term that she uses, but I think it's a great name for the people who work at the human level. But she actually goes back to Greek tragedy. she sees that in Greek tragedy that there are three rules of a Greek play, and the first one is the theora, where you explain the problem. So that's the second one is the crisis, where you get the crux of the problem and it's lived out without time limit. So in other words, you go through this cathartic part. It's the painful experience of the past, experience in the present moment, and opens the future. So again, it's bringing the past to the present. And I think that's what we do as a mediator. But the third thing is the catharsis is the conclusion, where the problem is solved and there is a unity created. Again, that's sort of very much like the Bhagavad Gita, moving to unity. But what she said, I think is interesting, is that she sees mediators like the Greek chorus. They mirror the tragic action and they become the voice of and their silent presence in the play. So in a way, I think Jacqueline talks about the Greek chorus as a mediator, and I think we do. We become the voice, and we are the chorus of the play. So again, coming back, this is all the modern theories are really based on these ancient concepts of the catharsis, and again, that's that movement, that flow. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, because I think the fact is that because, like I said, theoretical part and the practical part, and the practical part, actually, all this is in play, which you don't. I mean, if you really look at it, and then you say, "Oh, yes, all this is happening," but it's all happening in that moment. Like you're saying, it's all about that moment and what's going to happen, where it's going to go. But Greg, also that's why I was asking on that heart soul spirituality part of it, because that symposium I felt was a symposium that you should have been part of, definitely, because you would have added, I guess, I added a lot of value there. But because you were not part of that one, and the next one is going to happen only next year, some thoughts on the aspect of heart soul spirituality in relation to the mediator, the participants, and the process.
Well, I think defining spirituality, what it's not. For me, I can only speak about my own self, and I think that's what we bring. My life experience is that I was brought up in a particular religion. It was pretty tough, and I would say I'm a spiritual person without actually belonging to a religion. I mean, in a strict sense, I mean, I probably belong to all religions and none, if you know what I mean, that concept of, and I think all religions are trying to find that concept of connection with the earth and the hereafter. And Jacqueline talks a lot about that too in her work, is that the word mediator comes from the Latin, I think, the verb mediate is in the middle, is the reference, and priests are somehow are the link between that. And so in a way, it's that sort of unknown, why are we here, what's it all about? The only thing I can think of as spirituality is that, and I go back to the South African concept of Ubuntu, which is I am because you are. We kind of link together. And it's that humanity, and that's the spirituality. Now, I've got no idea if there's a God or what it is. I sense there is something out there. I've got no idea what it is. And I have no problem with people trying to name it. But it's the concept that I exist because you exist. And I think if I take that into the mediation, that is the spiritual aspect of it. And it's an honoring. And look, I think people inviting me as a mediator into their conflict is a great honor. And it's a respectful thing, and I have to be respectful. So that's why I come back to this concept of I have to get rid of my personality, because it's not about me. I'm honoring them, and I'm just giving them the space to find themselves. To me, that's spirituality. So yes, and I find it really funny when people who are religion say, "Oh, I'm spiritual, but you're bad and I'm good." To me, you've kind of missed it, guys. But
Greg, do you think, because I keep using this, you'll hear me talk about heart soul spirituality, but do you think that people would connect that aspect to religion, because for me that's not connected for me. So
Yeah.
I don't use it in the context of religion at all. But do you think that it gives that kind of a feeling to people, that you think when I use that, because I don't want to use it from that perspective at all, and I'm not using it from that perspective. Should in brackets should I write not talking about religion?
Well, look, I think religion plays a big part in a lot of conflict, and that's one of the things. And it's the loss of spirituality, which is the ironic thing about it, is that I because you disagree with me, I can kill you, or you're bad, so I can kill you, and it really flies in the face of our human connection. And I think in the end, I always think, as a mediator, the people in really high conflict often don't know how to solve it. Some people have mental illness and get caught in conflict, or some people are on drugs and so on. You can't do much with that. But I think the really difficult ones, both parties are in pain, and that's a breakdown in the spiritual connection. And so I see the mediator as a bridge, but I think you have to be very careful. And I think this is one of the other dangers that's come from our early period of mediation. There is an aspect of mediators saying mediation solves the world. This is the great cure. We can, and I think, it's really dangerous. And I think it's almost borders on unethical to think that you're going to make someone a better person because you've come to me as a great mediator. That is really dangerous. And it's really disrespectful, because it's your white privilege, or for me it's white privilege or whatever, that I've got the answer to the world, and you poor people, I'm going to rescue you because you poor people you're so stupid that you're in big trouble as a mediator, and that's not spiritual. So I think the word spirituality scares a lot of lawyers. They get this touchy-feely thing, we've got to keep it apart. We've got to have professional distance. I stand in the client's shoes and I can bash you because we're two lawyers. We can bash each other, and we're very neutral. We're sort of, and just outcome. We get you a great. So the law. Don't talk to me about the law. I mean, I worked in the country town where we had to live with the people in the town. So in suing them, I had to take into account that we still have to live with them, and have to find a solution. So I came to mediation from a community lawyer, having to work and how do we solve a problem. So mediation was a natural fit for me. I think that's what I would say. Spirituality is that the human spirit is the connection, and if we honour that, most matters will settle. And even if they only partly settle, that's all they need. We don't have to solve every problem. If we move them along 1 inch, that's all it is. And that's the concept of flow. If I can unblock the flow, they'll go and sort it out. They're on their way. I don't have to, So my time of success is if I can keep them moving,
No, because I think two aspects. One is the aspect of what you were saying, that, okay, I know how you should resolve your conflict. I know better kind of thing. So this is what I wanted discussed in that colonization, decolonization, because of course it goes into the direction of the colonization or colonialism in general. But I'm saying, when you talk about colonization of mediation, this is something also we needed to discuss. A lot of it did not come out. But the other thing about this community part that you're saying is really important. I mean, just when you're saying that we part of the community, we're looking at the larger picture. I think that's what is kind of missing there, because that's when the whole deal making and all happens, because you're not part of a larger community, because communities broke down over time. So there is nothing that holds that whole, then like we call the social fabric or social pressure, whatever it might be. I think those are the things that are missing, and those are also important aspects to put together. So this is where when I talk about the mediation circles, I think the work for those peacemakers, there are peacemakers and mediators, will also be to create communities, to bring community. This might bring communities together, and when communities come together, I think the resolution process, because of course when I talk about mediation, we're talking about not just individual disputes, you're talking about the larger disputes where within communities, where communities are affected. We've had a lot of discussions on this, that indigenous peoples and mediation. We had one whole symposium on that. And then Sarah Blake from Australia, she's been part of a lot of discussions. She's been working, of course, with indigenous communities there. So I think there's a much larger concept of mediation in general. that needs to be
Yeah.
discussed, and what the role of mediators in is going to be. Because finally, how I'm looking at it is that these people with the mediator mindset, when you bring them out, when you can actually have reasonable conversations, you can
Yeah.
actually create a platform where people like, you'll hear me. Look, Greg, there'll be a lot of repetition in what I'm going to say, because these are things I really feel that we need to work towards. So
Yeah.
politics, activism, advocacy, let them exist. They have a different maybe role to play, but the concept of conversations on a fair basis, fair level, that, I mean, there are no prejudices, of course, no
Mm.
stereotypes, nothing at all, just being able to have those conversations, I think that's what was missing. So
Yeah.
it's generally about the creating that kind of an atmosphere which people can take with them, actually not sitting down, even resolving a dispute, take them into their lives and use it for resolving conflicts in general around them. But where is, I feel that's missing. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think it's a challenge. We mediators work in isolation, and one of the problems is that unless you've got a supervisor, it's hard. Fortunately, my wife Margaret's a mediator also, and she's been mediating for 30 years. So our dinner table is debriefing over the mediation we've done today. So it's really helpful. And my colleague in England, Barbara Wilson, we would on Skype debrief with each other, and we've run these mediation retreats in Tuscany every year for the last, it's about our ninth year coming up, and it's a chance for about 18 or so mediators to have a week together, sitting and talking. And one of the issues that's coming up for that is we've now got a whole cohort of mediators who are now been mediating for 30 years, and they're about to retire. And we're going to lose a lot of intellectual property from people who, not the academics, they've been working in the field for 30 years, and I'm encouraging them to write papers. And that's why I've been writing a lot of papers and putting them up, because we need to capture that experience. Because I think there is a disconnect between the theorists who talk about balanced power and neutrality. They're static concepts, whereas we work in the coalface of total movement. And a lot of what I've been talking about, I've been getting theories that actually speak to me as a mediator. And I think we need, for the profession to get to where you want them to go, Vikram, we've got to get the theories right. And at the moment, I think our theories are wrong. Well, they're not wrong. They're historic theories. They had validity to start off with. But unless we can evolve the theories that actually speak to it. And I've just published a paper on mediate.com, or two papers actually, just came out in the last couple of weeks, where I list 15 theories that I think apply to the more fluid work we have in. And to me, and this is a start of a conversation on theories that actually speak to the dynamics of mediation, rather than the static, issues of neutrality and some, academic sort of stuff. Unless we can get those theories, we're going to still always struggle, and we'll not be able to explain ourselves to people who think, oh, you're just touchy-feeling, just a big hug. Yeah. As someone said, mediation, as definition, is two people stuck in a room with a hippie. That was a comedian at one of our national mediation conferences. That was his definition of mediation, and that's often the view of a lot of lawyers. We're just hippies, and it's a hug fest. When it's not, it's so much deeper than that. And I think we've got to get the theory to work with it.
Well, that's why I think that's why these conversations, I think what all these people that you have who are, like you're saying, retiring. Of course, you never retire as a mediator, but I think they have a very important role to play. So let's get them into conversation. Let's have a session with them talking about their experiences. Because look, I have that one show which I call Mediator Experiences. The idea being experiences in the mediation world, so they can be part of that. Then one series which I started, we have only actually done, I think, one episode, is Mediator Reflects. So that is basically with Michael Lang, because he's for reflective practice. He's done a lot of work there. The only thing is he's been a little busy for some time because of course, some personal issues he had. So let's see if that comes out. So we can actually have some. The whole idea of the World Mediation Circle is also one part is that mediators can actually, there's a circle created there. They can actually have these conversations with themselves. Like you said, there might be a lonely kind of activity for a lot of people, and they don't get to have those discussions. So let's create these little circles for that. So
Mm.
we can have just a reflective practice thing that he does. I mean, like Michael Lang has these reflective practice groups in various parts of the world. So one of that one session we had where he had these people from his Irish practice group into that
Yeah,
session, and it was one of the first times that he was actually doing something which is going out into YouTube, because
yeah,
these are again closed spaces. It
yeah,
might be okay, mediators talking to each other, but maybe a 10 of them. But why I'm
yeah,
trying to open it out is because a lot of people will not get that opportunity, which is what
yeah,
I was telling Vidana also, that just the opportunity to listen to people who have certain experiences, which a lot of people will never be able to get. So let's do that, Greg. Let's open out these conversations that whenever, whoever we can bring in. So whatever you do in Tuscany, now all of you sit together in Tuscany or have these conversations. Okay, we don't want to go live from Tuscany. I would love to do that. We can
yeah.
go live from Tuscany with Greg. We can do that
Yes.
when is the next one? When is the next one?
Next June. Next June. We've had 3 years off. This will be our 9th time we've done it. We actually were ready to go in 2020, but COVID hit us, so we had to refund the money. We thought this year was too early, so next June we're going, and we've totally booked out straight away because so many people wanted to come because they missed it. So we will do it. We'll probably do it every June. So this will. Yeah, but it's
So,
good. It's a nice time just to relax and talk, and that's
yeah,
what mediators are very good at. And mediation are very interesting people. That's the
yeah,
other thing.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, they're very interesting people, and they have a lot of life skills. And you know,
No, like I said, they're special because, like I said, to have those conversations and to be able to bring in someone who actually says, I know nothing, is a
yeah,
big thing. I mean, to be able
that's
to have
right.
conversations with that person is a very different thing rather than someone saying, oh, I know this, and this whole concept of, say, rational thinking that you're talking about, logic and everything, and not being able to open out to newer thoughts.
Yeah,
I think so. That's why this is important. So what we can do is we should have that, all these people who've been in your retreat. Okay, you do your retreat, and then we have conversations around that, what came out from it, what discussions, what thoughts. So let's do that. I mean, interesting. I think it's just interesting to you just bring people who have that kind of experience out there, which is what
yeah,
I'm trying to do, which is what the whole
yeah,
idea is. That let's just put it out there. There's so much to learn from people who've had that kind of practical experience, but not
yeah,
on the, maybe some, look, theoretical part is also important, so I have that, plus also the practical part of it, not
yeah,
putting anything into any theory, just
yeah.
general thoughts, understanding, whatever. So both those things will go together. So let me put it up there, let's put it out there, what Greg is written. Let's see, what is it? Why I argue for mediation to move beyond the dehumanized
That,
legal mediation model.
that's the first part. It's the actual second part is that's the argument about why I think the law is stuck. But the second one is the part 2 of that, which I set out the 15 theories, and I talk about the Bhagavad Gita, and I talk about some of the things I've talked about. And
So,
to me, and I've got a definition of mediation there that I think really relates more to the practical. Um,
because
and
the thing is that, Greg, you'll hear me say this again. Of
that's the
course,
one,
I,
yeah,
I, I, I don't see, I keep saying I don't read books. Articles definitely I can read, but instead of that, if we discuss this, so when we'll
yeah,
have a session only to discuss this, because I had a session on Mahatma Gandhi and mediation. So the
yeah,
idea was to talk about it, but that's something which is still, there were parts of which didn't go too much into, because everyone generally, okay, concept of humanistic mediation we were talking about, but whether Mahatma Gandhi was doing mediation or not and all that, so that part of it we didn't go too much into. But I think let's just have one, what do we call, let's just have one on humanistic mediation, call it
mm.
humanistic mediation. That's what it is, humanistic approach to mediation.
Well,
Look,
it's I've used the word humanistic in honor of Jacqueline has a view, and a lot of it's the mirroring of Jacqueline's. It is a really interesting work. We've taken she's only run twice in English. She teaches it in French and Italian, but because she speaks English, we brought a lot of Australians and Americans over in 2018 and in 2019, and she worked with us. Fascinating way she mediates. It's very challenging for us Western mediators, but really dynamic. And she's in her 80s. I hope she survived COVID. You know, it's been pretty awful over there. But my wife Margaret is translated or hasn't translated, but she's looked through one of her French books and done a paper on humanistic mediation, which I can send to you. And I talk a lot about that. But I think, in a way, to me, what a humanistic mediation is a description that I always want to work with the humans, whereas the alternative is what I call shuttle mediation, where it's about the solution and keeping the parties apart and just getting a deal. And as I said, look, there's an aspect of that's okay, if you want to just crunch a deal. But I think humanistic mediation opens the door for something to emerge, and it's about the new beginnings, whereas I think the other side is about the ending. And that's how I would class it to do.
So what do you want? Should we do a forum? Because look, I have a forum concept. So just a discussion. So we just have a discussion. Then otherwise the symposium forum format where a speaker comes in. So you talk about it. But let's do something on humanistic mediation specifically. Let's call it that, because this whole heart, soul, spirituality part of it, it'll fit in somewhere there, but let's keep it separately. So whenever you have time, let's fix up some sessions on that. And let's bring in people to have discussions on humanistic mediation. Let's do that.
Yeah. So that'd be good, Vikram. Well, thank you for that. It was been great talking to you. And
any final closing remarks? Going away.
Look, comments? I just thank you. I thank you, and I think we mediators need to talk. And the answer is there's no answer, and the answer emerges, and we work in the moment, and that's what I do as a mediator. And yes, and and I think that's that human connection. We connect as humans, and we honor each other, and that's really what mediation is. That's the spiritual aspect.
No, that's why I think the linkage between all these things that you're saying, one is in the moment concept. So in that moment, and when you talk about, which I was saying, not the same river, not the same man, I think every moment that aspect is changing. Sometimes you feel that the people who came in to that mediation are the same people in the next moment also. Actually, things are changing, and to recognize that and to let it flow in that manner, not being stuck there. I think that part of it. And why the heart soul aspect also, spiritual one, heart soul is to be when you're connecting at that level, at a different level altogether. And you're bringing a very different aspect of a person, which is the human side of it, because human is going to be heart soul also. You can't just leave it out. That's a very important part of it. So I think the entire package of that human, heart soul spirituality. So lots of interesting things to discuss with you, Greg. Thank you very much. And we'll fix up for humanistic mediation thing. Neutrality and mediation. Do you want to be part of that symposium?
Yep, I can do that. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll send you the schedule. Then you can give me your thing. It's between this one. I'm keeping a little short one, because then people get into vacation mode, holiday season kind of thing. So I'm only keeping from 12th to 16th. So it'll be a short one. So let's do that. So thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you, Vikram.
Bye.